Rajesh, very good afternoon to you. Warm good afternoon. Today we have an interview with Mr. Rajesh Nath, Managing Director of VDMA India, who's a known entity in the entire spectrum of industry, especially the mining industry, with which Rajesh has been associated for, I would say, almost 2 decades and more, perhaps. And right now, as the Managing Director of VDMA India, he is responsible for more than 60 verticals, 64 if I'm not mistaken, more than 64 verticals I'm sorry, 38 verticals, 38.
36, right, 36. Yeah. 36.
36, yeah. 36 industrial verticals, right from plastics industry to mining and other industries like steel industry, so on and so forth, the entire machinery segment. So with that, a warm welcome to Mr. Rajesh Nath, Managing Director of VDMA India. Rajesh, once again, guten Morgen, and as you are aware, VDMA India, we all know, represents the German Machinery and Plant Manufacturers Association, which has been in operation for more than 2 decades now, and the mining machinery division has been proactive in catering to the interests of Indian mining industry since the beginning of VDMA. So VDMA has a very strong connection with the mining industry, so to say. Since VDMA represents 38 industrial verticals now, cutting across the entire industrial spectrum, how do you see the mining industry in terms of your significance in terms of business prospects? And out of 550 odd VDMA member companies in India, how many members do you have for, let's say, only the mining equipment and service sector? And also you have certain IT companies which are in the mining sector. So putting all this together would serve the mining sector. What is the volume of exports by Germany as far as the Indian mining sector is concerned? So over to you, Rajesh.
Right. Thank you, Nirmalia, and good afternoon to you, Nirmalia, and all our viewers, and good morning to the viewers who may have joined from overseas. And thank you, Nirmalia. Pleasure for me to be here today on this show today, and thank you for inviting me to share my views. Nirmala, as you rightly mentioned, the mining division within VDMA, it's a strong division which has been in existence for several years. We have some very old, well-known German companies in the mining sector, companies like Bilateral, ThyssenKrupp, who have been there for many, many years. And if we look at the mining division within VDMA and Nirmalia, as you mentioned, we have roughly around 150 members who are active in the mining sector. The turnover of the VDMA members from the mining division is roughly about 3.2 billion euros. And what is unique, Nirmalia, about this sector is that actually 90% or more is the export. Because as you know, mining activities in Germany or within Germany has shrunk to quite a large extent. So almost more than 90% is export of equipments for this particular sector. And that is why it makes it unique, because most of our other sector average is about 75%. But when we take the mining machinery division, it is much higher than the average of the exports of German machinery from the other sector. Now, coming specific to India, what you mentioned, Nirmalia, again, I would say we have some of the companies who have been actually quite active in the Indian market. Whether we talk about, let's say, Humboldt Veda, in fact, if you remember, Nirmalia, they were one of the first ones who started with the washing of coal, the butter jig and all. They were introduced by Humboldt Veda. Then we've had also companies like ThyssenKrupp, who are very well established in India, have a big setup in India. Then companies like DMT are there, Almineral are there. A lot of companies who are in the drive sector are there, magnetic separators. So approximately, if you look at the export of German mining machinery to India, Nirmalia, it is roughly to the tune of about 26 million euros, or converted, I would say, about 210 crores Indian rupees. So it certainly forms an important part of the German exports to India. And I'm sure as we go ahead also, Nirmalia, we will see activities, more activities of the German companies in this in the mining sector.
Yeah, and let's say out of 550 VDMA members, how many would be from mining alone?
So if you look at the mining sector, as I said, in Germany, we have about almost 150 members. If you look at India, I would say we would have about 35 members who are from the mining sector who have a presence in India.
Great. The recent amendment of MMDR Act has set a new era in coal and mining sector. Especially, it has helped in promoting the ease of doing business and offering more flexibility to the miners, especially the merchant mine owners today. What is your opinion as to the benefits of the new amendment of MMDR Act is concerned? And as you know, they can now today, they can actually, in the open market, even the captive mine owners, they can sell 25% of their production in the open market today. So how do you think this has actually helped in terms of opening up the mining sector, which was predominantly, I would say, public sector control, and today now we are moving more towards privatization, as Mr. Prahlad Joshi also recently mentioned that this disinvestment process will also go on. So how do you think this has helped the mining industry?
I think a very good and a very relevant question, Nirmalia. Thanks for putting up this question. So if we look at the participation of GDP from the mines and minerals sector in India, Nirmalia, it is about 1.75%. Now, this is quite low because if you looked at developed countries, their contribution from mines and minerals sector is roughly to the tune of 5% to 7%. So in the Indian scenario, our contribution to the GDP of the country is quite less or much less than the average. Now, we all know, Nirmalia, India has a young population. We need to create jobs for the young population. We talk about the demographical advantage, but I think that one of the challenges of the demographical advantage is how do you create enough jobs for this young population, what we have? And I think it is the mineral and mine sector can really play a role. And especially when we look at the amendments now, the MMDRA Act, I think which talks about higher participation of private companies. Now, this can help to increase our share from the mines and mineral sectors from the present, let's say 1.75 to at least 2.5%. And I think this is all a very good step when we talk about self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So I think these are the steps in the right direction. And not only it will help in GDP increment for the mines and mineral sector, but also it can help in creation of about 55 lakh new jobs. And I think this is very important for our country, Nirmalia, because 5.5 million new jobs, this can certainly help in this employment generation for the younger population. Also, on the other hand, if we look at when the private players, when they can increase their share in the mining as well as allow operators of the existing mines to sell 50% of minerals additionally extracted by them. This can help us also, as we have also seen that the imports have reduced, Nirmalia. And I think this is a very important aspect to be taken into consideration, because not only that does that help the whole economy of India, and also another factor is, since we have very ambitious target, India whole production of 1 billion tons by 2024. So this can really help in increasing the coal production, as perhaps at present, if we look at this target, seems a little difficult to achieve by 2024. Perhaps it will get advanced by a few years. But I think these are the very right steps in the right direction, helping in employment generation, creating more revenue for this sector, as well as helping in the growth of the GDP of the country. So I think it is the right step the government has taken, and this will help and give a boost to the coal mining sector.
Thank you, Rajesh. I have a very related question with regard to the recent auctioning of 500 government's plan of auctioning 500 blocks through a very transparent auction process, which has positively moved at a very fast pace, I would say, compared to what we are used to earlier. And some of the successful bidders have already started their mining operations. To this end, what kind of growth opportunities and business prospects? I don't expect you to give me exact figures, but what kind of growth do you foresee for your members during the next 5 to 10 years? And specifically in terms of also in terms of technological know-how, primarily talking of the largest coal block, Devacha Pachami block in West Bengal, where I was talking to Mr. Rana Som, who was earlier the executive chairman and chairman of NNDC earlier. So Mr. Rana Som told me that there are specific problems they have with regard to the use of technology, which is required for operating the mines in Devacha Pachami block. So there, your members can play a very important role in providing the technology which is required for mining in especially the mines which are coming up and where we do not have neither the technology nor the equipment available for these mining. And the second part I would maybe relate to, as you know, Rajesh, in longwall mining, India has not been successful. So this is also something which I think our German technological partners, they can come forward with solutions, keeping our nature of soil and the nature of land in mind. What kind of technology perhaps is best suited? So what do you think your members can contribute towards this initiative?
Thanks, Nirmale. And as you correctly said, Nirmale, I think what really stands out for the German technology, Nirmale, especially when we look at the mining sector, is the huge experience that the German manufacturers bring. Now, we know even some of the underground mining in Germany, we've had some of the deepest mines are present in Germany. So the German equipment suppliers supplying to the underground mines in Germany and globally have a lot of experience in varied and difficult conditions. And I think that is what really gives them that confidence and strength to give technology solutions for difficult conditions also. And I think this is what is required. Actually, we know in India, as you correctly mentioned, underground mining or longwall technology has not been so successful. In fact, if we look at our present production, almost 95% is coming from open cast mine and only about 5% roughly is from underground mines. So unfortunately, the underground mine experience has not been so good with India. But I think this is where, and one more point I would like to highlight here, Nirmale, is that what is it that makes, we call the German technology having that cutting edge? What is it that gives them this cutting edge, Nirmale? Now, one of the important aspects when we look at the global spending in R&D, research and development, so the global average is about roughly around 2.5% the companies spend in R&D. The VDMA members, on an average, from our experience, spend 7 to 8% in R&D. In India, we are spending actually less than 1% in the R&D. And I think this, since the German companies are spending a higher amount in R&D, and this is, I think, really gives them this cutting edge technology, what they have and they can offer. And I'm sure with the more blocks going in auction, the mining activity increasing in India, this also gives the possibility for German manufacturers also to supply the technology. And I think an important aspect also, Nirmale, is that the whole mining process will take a shift. We would have to look at possibilities of green mining or trying to control the pollution in mining to a large extent. And I think for this, what is required is you need good technology, sustainable technology, and proper utilization of resources. I think optimal utilization of resources is very important. for the whole mining process to become sustainable. And this is where I think, with the vast experience that the German manufacturers have, operating in various conditions, difficult conditions throughout the globe, they can really be good partners for the Indian mining industry and also supply the appropriate technology. So I'm sure the coming years, as I was mentioning earlier, we would see more German companies coming, and it will also give a boost to the whole mining industry in India. And that has always been our endeavor, to give optimal solution as per the requirement of the industry or as per the requirement of the conditions. And I think this is where the German companies are well geared to help and support the Indian mining industry.
Thank you, Rajesh. I have, very related sort of question, since we are talking about sustainable and environment-friendly mining operations. What do you think would be the role of EVs in the days ahead? Could such equipments be available produced by the German technology providers, especially for mining equipments, where EVs could play a major role?
Again, I think, thank you for this question, Nirmali, and I think especially when we talk about COP26, this really has a lot of significance also. Let me share some very interesting statistics, Nirmali, if you allow me. So actually, if we look at the global CO2 emission from the mining sector, it is approximately 2 to 3%. Actually, it is, unfortunately, mining industry has got the tagline of being a polluting industry, but actually the CO2 emission from the mining is just about 2 to 3%. And this can be controlled also. And when we look, what are the reasons for this emissions from the mining sector? In fact, 40 to 50% comes from diesel used in the equipments, in the mobile equipments. And another 30 to 35% comes from non-renewable energy usage. So actually, coming back to your question, if we can switch, Nirmala, to sustainable fuels, and this can help the carbon reduction in the carbon emission by about 70%, even if we are using existing equipments or new equipments. And further, if we are switching to green sources of electricity, if we are using wind energy, solar energy, this can address up to 30 to 50% of the current emission output. And I think this can really, these two steps, using equipments, using fuel, I would say using sustainable fuels for the equipments, as you mentioned, using electric vehicles also, if electrification of vehicles can happen, as well as using renewable energy sources to run the mines. This itself, these two steps itself, can help in 75 to 80% reduction in the CO2 emissions from the mines. So I think this is where the mining industry has to move ahead if we have to make mining more sustainable and mining more green. And if we, as India, I think we also have a huge challenge. Our Honorable Prime Minister has spoken about zero carbon emission by 2070. So for us to undertake these processes, I think such steps are necessary. But of course, we also have to be very clear about the fact that this would entail investments. And it is very important that the government has a long-term plan and strategy so that the right amount of investment is made available also if we have to go green and if we have to reduce the carbon emission from the mines. So I think it is a long-term strategy, but it is the right time. And that's why I find your question so relevant, Nirmalya, that this should give the decision makers should now start thinking in this line. So we have the new regulations or we have support system coming for the mining sector.
Thank you, Rajesh. And in fact, moving forward, it's relevant to what you were just mentioning. You were mentioning about the COP26, where our net zero target is 2070, which is much beyond what Germany or other
Yes.
nations have sort of given their commitment for. Now, though we have almost 50 years, 48 years to move towards achieving this, how do you think India would be able to meet the challenge? And I think there again, the role of VDMA comes in. What kind of support can VDMA members offer to meet this target as far as mining industry is concerned in the area of decarbonization, which has become so very relevant today? It's a necessity more than anything else. And some of the suggestions which keep coming up is, of course, use of alternate fuels. Then you just can't blame coal because of the carbon footprint it creates, but there are always ways and means by which you can reduce your carbon footprint. For example, coal gasification is one area where Government of India has given, even in the last budget, the Prime Minister has been talking about it. So there are like using of gasification, and coal gasification could also be used to produce hydrogen, which is again eco-friendly fuel. So to this end, what is the role of VDM and what can VDM offer?
Absolutely. So I think what is important in the whole process, Nirmalya, is to have equipments, because as I mentioned with the statistics, more than 50 to 60% of the carbon dioxide emission is coming from the equipments, from the diesel usage in the equipment. So you need equipments now which can utilize sustainable fuels. We need equipments which can run on battery. This is very important. E-equipments are required in the running, and this is where I think the Germans, with the development that is happening, can offer such technology. I would like to just hear one important aspect I would just like to share. See, the decarbonization of haulage trucks could reduce mines emission by up to 25%, with additional benefits of lower maintenance cost, about 20 to 30% lower maintenance cost, and lower fuel cost, 40 to 60% lower fuel cost. If here we can take the right steps in the right direction. Second point is, yes, when we talk about, you mentioned about hydrogen, and there is a lot of work going on in Germany also on this concept of power to X. I think Germany is working a lot in this direction. We have certain plants also, some sort of, you could say, sample plants which are also showing the utilization. So this is very important in the Indian scenario. And I think, Nirmalya, for us, it becomes very critical because unlike Europe, India is still largely dependent on fossil fuels as the main primary source of energy. And let us be very frank on this, we cannot see this replacement happening very soon. So the important role of fossil fuel as the primary energy source in India would continue. Of course, we are going in the right direction with due emphasis and due increment in the renewable energy. So what will happen is, on one hand, our renewable energy production will increase, but overall our whole production, electricity generation, higher electricity generation is required, and this cannot be covered through increment from the renewable energy source only. That is why we need also our fossil fuel production to increase to meet the growing demand. We would have a demand of almost, I think, I was reading somewhere about 8 to 9% higher electricity demand. And for this, I think the importance of coal would continue. And I think this is what makes Indian scenario, Nirmalya, so complex, this huge dependence on fossil fuel as the primary energy source in India.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rajesh. In fact, there's also economics in place, and even today producing hydrogen, especially through electrolysis, is quite an expensive proposition. And so it's not going to, the writing is on the wall, but it cannot be done overnight. And moreover, as you correctly mentioned, our dependence on fossil fuels is also because of the fact we have huge resources. We have huge resources of coal available in this country, which needs to be used judiciously. And so, just to judiciously use it is what the challenge is. Now, moving on to another relevant topic, which we keep referring to always, use of Industry 4.0 and IoT. VDMA members have already made significant contribution in this area. Now, could you highlight the various technologies offered by your members, especially with, recently, as we all know, CMPDI has been recommending this, and Coal India has already started using it in many of the mines of Coal India. Use of drones for survey of mines, and since the mining industry handles a lot of data, so the management of big data analysis as a part of Industry 4.0 initiative is so very important. So in this context, what is VDMA's role and what can VDMA contribute towards this end?
So true, Nirmalya, as you rightly mentioned, and I think this is where we are in the right steps. Automation, utilization of Industry 4.0. So let me give one example. I think the biggest benefit one can derive from Industry 4.0, Nirmalya, is remote monitoring or condition monitoring. I think this is an important factor. And even if we are taking, what we require is to have the whole process of mining sustainable and better utilization of resources, whatever be the resources available. So how do you utilize your fleet to the optimal level? So again, here capturing the data, analyzing the data, and I think this is what real-time data or Industry 4.0 gives you the benefit of capturing the real-time data. I'll just give an example, Nirmalya. We have a German company, the Schaeffler Group. Now they have come out with the smart bearings. Now these smart bearings transmit the data, so data can be captured remotely also, and this can help before the breakdown of the machine. Actually, you get enough data, you have the real-time data available. So you can analyze that data, and through predictive maintenance, you can prevent the breakdown of a machine. And as we all know, in any mining operation, any machine breakdown can really lead to hampering of the production. And the whole line, in fact, gets hampered. So when you are able to take remedial action and take the steps necessary, which can avoid breakdown of machine, I think these are small steps. These are not, I think these are very cost-effective steps and with a very high return of investment also here, Nirmalya. So I think this is one of the biggest advantages of Industry 4.0. And of course, the German industry has been very proactive in Industry 4.0. In fact, as you would know, the term Industry 4.0 has originated in Germany only. And it was Klaus Schwab who announced the term Industry 4.0 at the Economic Forum. So, and VDMA itself, within VDMA, Nirmalya, we have formed this group of, we call it Forum Industry 4.0, where we are trying to, of course, mining division is an important member, but also the other sectors. We are trying to integrate them in this Industry 4.0 process. And going ahead, I think this has extreme importance and benefit for the mining sector also, because there is a general perception that maybe Industry 4.0 is something more for new technologies rather than the traditional technologies like mining or steel industry. But I think this is where actually the revolutionary change is going to take place, when you are going to implement Industry 4.0 also in such traditional manufacturing methods or traditional technologies like mining and steel industry.
Thank you, Rajesh. In fact, I could relate to what you are mentioning about Schaeffler, because we recently did an interview with Mr. Harsh Kadam, who's the managing director of Schaeffler India. And in fact, we were talking about predictive maintenance, preventive maintenance, and condition monitoring. So this is, and in the specifically the other industry which I cater to is the steel industry, where in the steel industry, primarily the cost of bearings could be huge, and a shutdown or a breakdown time could incur huge losses. So they're collecting the data and using that for predictive maintenance or in fact condition monitoring of the bearing is so very important. And these are huge bearings we use in steel industry. Also in mining industry, it is used. So I think this is very relevant, where the data could be used for the benefit of the industry and especially to ensure that you incur adequate cost savings because of that. So with that, I'll come to our next question. During the next 5 years, what are the focus areas of VDMA? Because you've always been a visionary, and you brought VDMA India to where it is today. To the fact that cutting across industries, Rajesh Nath is a name to reckon with. That became possible only with the amount of I would say orientation level that you have put in and to push your team to move forward. And that is what made VDMA India to what it is today. Now, as far as your focus is concerned, what are the specific verticals and what are the business areas where you think VDMA India could play a major role, including the mining, of course. Mining is one, steel is one, then you have the plastic industry, other industries. So what are the specific industries where you think VDMA India would play a significant role during the next decade?
So first of all, thank you for the words of appreciation, Nirmalia. Thanks so much. And I think it's an effort of the whole team put together. I think whole team and with the backing of our head office that we have been able to undertake a lot of activity. But coming back to your question, Nirmalia, I think it's a very relevant question. And I think we have seen a lot of changes in the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic. And I think this is going to also, to some extent, shape the future, Nirmalia. If we look at what has happened in last 2 years, we've been faced with the whole factor of uncertainty. In fact, I jokingly mentioned people were very liberally using the term VUCA before the pandemic, but actually nobody really understood the impact of the U in VUCA, the uncertainty factor in VUCA, or the volatility factor in VUCA before the pandemic hit us. And I think what has it shown? It has shown that for the first time in history of manufacturing, your supply was impacted, demand was impacted, workforce was impacted due to the pandemic. And this has all taken us to thinking that the enterprises need to be more resilient. They need to be more agile also to the changing conditions. Because the unpredictability factor has become so high, Nirmalia. We do not know what can happen in the next 6 months or 1 year. And how do you make an organization withstand, become more resilient, become more agile to the changing condition? And to a large extent, I think, Nirmalia, the role of automation. We have in India, of course, being a large country, having large labor force, or I would say economical labor force, automation was not being given such due importance. But I think now with the pandemic coming in, it is being viewed totally with a different angle or with a different perspective. And I think this is one of the important areas, I think, where we will see more development happening in India in the automation sector. Renewable energy is, again, as we have spoken earlier also, the government's thrust towards renewable energy, towards green energy. So I'm sure renewable energy, solar energy, be it solar, be it wind energy, or even fossil fuel. In fact, we just have recently I had just gone to Chandigarh. So we have one of the German companies. In fact, very interesting. They have set up a plant where they are going to generate methane gas from the agriculture waste. We have this problem of pollution through the stubble burning. So utilizing that and generating methane gas from that, I think this is really it's going to be a big game changer for states like Punjab, Haryana, if this technology can be implemented. And I think this plant is going to be inaugurated shortly. So I think this is where we will see the change happening. And then coming again specific to India, we have a lot of thrust, Nirmalia, on infrastructure. And I think infrastructure is really going to drive India's economy. Because if we have seen what has really helped sustain India in the last 2 years has been the government spending in infrastructure. Because the spending in infrastructure has multiplier effect. It helps capital equipment generation, the port sector, be it the steel, mining, or even the cement sector, all these sectors, the port sectors will get a boost with the infrastructure. So I think certainly if I were to sum it up, I would say automation, renewable energy, infrastructure. And of course, another sector with the where as VDMA, we are not so directly involved in the health sector, but we have a division called medical technology. And I think this is where we are seeing a lot of interest also growing in India in the medical technology field. And we are also, as VDMA, trying to get a German delegation from the medical technology sector coming to India. So I think these are the new sectors. Of course, the traditional sectors, mining, as you mentioned, would remain, steel, metallurgy focus would remain, food processing, packaging. Again, now with the pandemic, the change or shift in packaged equipments, making it more hygienic, trying to reduce, looking at the hygiene aspect also. So food processing, packaging would also be one of the sectors. So I think largely these are going to be the main sectors going into the future.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think, specifically during the post-pandemic, during the period of pandemic, the nature of business has also changed across the world.
Yes.
And, more and more focus is, in fact, I could give you an example where recently one of the technology suppliers for steel industry in Europe did an entire commissioning of a plant in Bangladesh remotely. The entire commissioning was done remotely. So this is how business has changed over the years. Right. In fact, in the steel sector, I could see how the use of data has been able to help the industry move forward, working remotely. And these changes obviously means that food packaging becomes so very important. Energy storage becomes so very important. So yes. all these industries have played a very major role where I think VDMA has done a lot. So coming to our last question, as the managing director of VDMA India, could you highlight the total volume of trade between India? I think you mentioned it at the beginning, but if you could, for the benefit of yes. our audience, if you could just mention that once again, the total volume of trade between India and Germany, and specifically, you mentioned about mining as well. Now, how do you think VDMA India could play the role of a catalyst in promoting industry-academia interaction? Now, this is again one area where I think we have to learn a lot from Germany, because in Germany, every stage of their R&D, it's the industry and academia which works together in promoting and developing technologies. And what kind of assistance could VDMA provide in development and transfer of technology in this new economic order that we are walking into right now?
Sure. Yeah. So coming to the total trade, Nirmala, the total bilateral trade between Germany and India is roughly about 20 billion euros. And of course, due to the pandemic, it took a slight hit, but I think we are rebounding very well in 2021. And 21, I think we may cross this 20 billion mark also. And it is, I think one of the very important aspects, Nirmala, is that it is not trade in one direction. We have, when we look at, for example, the machinery or the technology side, we have also increased participation or export of Indian equipments as well as Indian components to Germany. And in fact, this has been increasing before the pandemic. Year on year, it was increasing by 15%. And I think this also gives a lot of opportunity for Indian companies, Indian entrepreneurs to look at Germany as a destination for their exports as well as for spreading their wings in Europe. Coming now to your next question about, I think two aspects what India can benefit strongly from the German experience. One you correctly mentioned is the industry academia interaction. Now this is very strong in Germany. In fact, at VDMA itself, we have we call it working groups. So on a regular basis, we form these working groups amongst our members, which handle actually projects, R&D, maybe some research and development projects also, where these projects are then given to the universities or to research centers, because they can really do the research, help and support the industry. So in this way, the research R&D that is being done is very industry specific. I think this is perhaps one aspect we may miss out sometime in India, but that is very important. I think that the research and development done really helps and support the industry. And this can only happen when you have a very close collaboration, because I'm sure the R&D centers are very well equipped. But until and unless they have this interaction with the industry, they would also not be aware of what are the requirements of the industry or what solution does the industry require. So this interaction, academia and industry interaction is very important. And the second important aspect is the dual system of training in Germany, Nirmalya. So actually the students itself, they get at a very young age, they get involved in the practical aspects also. So in fact, many of the applied science colleges in Germany, they have such a format that perhaps the student is doing 3 days, he's doing practical training, and 2 days he's attending classes. So I think involving the students at a young age, helping them to get industry exposure, really helps to make them fit for the industry. I use this term fit because this is very important. And I think there was a study done which showed in India, actually the number of only about less than, I forget the exact figure, but I think it was less than 15% of the graduates can directly be absorbed by the industry because they lack this practical knowledge that is the requirement for the industry. So I think when we are talking largely in a stronger industry academia interaction and the colleges or our educational institutions involving the students in practical training. Of course, this is not only limited to the colleges, because for this to be successful, the industry needs to come forward. Because the industry must be able to absorb or give internship to these students. Then only can this endeavor be successful. But I'm sure with the government endeavors also in Skilling India, Skill Development Council is doing a lot of good work. We have certain sectors like the automotive sector, for example, has been very proactive in this field. So I'm sure here also for the mining sector, there is a lot of possibilities open, imparting practical training, getting the industry more involved, giving the students in the mining sector more practical exposure. And it is a win-win situation. It will help the industry, it will help the students also, make these students more employable for the industry. So I'm sure these are the steps which has already been taken in India, steps in the right direction, and we can only hope that these steps are further strengthened and the role of the industry in interacting closely with the educational institutes, and this would give a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much for giving us so much of time today for an excellent interaction. And I'm sure VDMA in the days ahead will have a more proactive role with regard to what you also mentioned about academia and industry interactions. And I'm sure you will bring in more delegations with the mining institute, especially, like Indian School of Mines, which is an IIT today. So with ISM Dhanbad, with the other research institutes like CFRI, Central Field Research Institute, Institute of Minerals and Materials Technology, where jointly there could be opportunities of industry and the research institutions working together to develop technologies in India, which in fact most of the miners are also doing. For example, NMDC, Coal India, they're also interacting closely with the academia to bring in solutions. So with that, Rajesh, I thank you once again, and I'm sure your inputs would go a long way in giving an assurance to this industry. Thank you, Rajesh.